Hello and welcome to A Walk in the Woods at Midnight. My name is Jess. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I am joined by the fabulous Jenny. Jenny, how's it going?
Hello, it's going well.
Good to see you. And today we're going to be reviewing and talking about Train to Busan.
That's right. I can give you guys a little bit of background on this.
Okay.
Train to Busan is a 2016 Korean horror film, and it takes place almost completely on a bullet train in South Korea during a zombie virus outbreak. So that's it. So it kind of gives the film a little bit of a claustrophobic
Mm.
feel, which is effective. And it's caused by this outbreak is caused by like a really greedy corporation who two of the people on the bullet train are kind of benefiting from or who have inadvertently caused, I think, this outbreak related to this company.
So we should actually establish, why don't we give an overview of the movie first?
Oh, okay,
Right,
okay.
what you're doing now. Why don't we give an overview so people who haven't seen it can get a feel for the movie, and then we'll say, okay, now we're going to start spoiling it and talking at length about the
Oh,
movie.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you're doing it fine. I'm just saying.
I needed that warning though about giving something away because I almost immediately do. Um,
Yeah, it's
so,
okay.
so it's the infection. Just super generally, the infection starts to. There's one person who hops on the train before it leaves the station and has the zombie virus, and pretty soon, almost everybody is infected with this virus.
Well, that's what I thought was so interesting was I didn't know anything about this movie going into it other than the fact that it was like a zombie movie, and I don't I don't have feelings one way or the other about zombie movies. They're just there, and they don't necessarily scare me. But this was I like the central idea um, uh, of this one because it was like the safest place to be in Korea was this train, except that it was full of zombies all of a sudden, and um, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, bam, when you got bit, you got infected like right away.
Yes.
You got
Yeah.
infected right away. There was no incubation period. You were just bit, boom, you were a zombie.
Yes.
And so it happened fast. And so it didn't take long for that train to get infected really quickly. And the film revolved around the protagonist was this hedge fund manager who was taking his daughter to see his ex-wife in Busan. Um, and she, can you imagine if she had gone by herself? She keeps saying, "I'm old enough to go by myself," and he said, "No way! I'm going to escort you there on the train." And um,
Although at times she seems almost slightly more r rational or something than her father does, but I know we'll get into that a little bit later.
he does seem distracted a lot. There's a lot going on that we're not told about. I think there's a lot going on in I, he his hedge fund seems to have something to do with this corporation that has something to do with the zombie outbreak. So I think that's in the back of his mind, and so he's distracted with that. Um, and so the overview is that train full of zombies headed for Busan, where it seems to be safe. They keep skipping stops, or they stop places, and it turns out the places are overloaded with zombies. Zombies are incredibly fast, and I think we're probably going to start spoiling it now. It's obviously it's a survival movie with
Yeah.
with with a bunch of characters at the beginning, especially the man and his his little girl being the
Mhm.
central protagonist that we're rooting for to make it to Busan. So now we're getting into spoilers because we're going to tell you about our feelings on how the story was told and the plot and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, so, a couple of things. This is not really a spoiler, but one thing that about these zombies is that, I found them a little scarier than the regular kind of, like, slow-moving zombies for whatever reason. I think that, like, these guys, they moved fast. They
Yeah,
were rabid and they were like, single-minded like all zombies are, but they move quick. And it takes a little time for the people who are not zombies, who are just like our core characters. It takes them a little time to figure out how to sort of hide from them or, like use the zombies' weaknesses in order
mm-hmm.
to navigate the train to kind of like save certain groups of people. I was wondering because I know we've talked about this before a little bit, and you kind of just said like zombie movies usually for you are just like they're just kind of there, and that's
Yeah.
kind of how it is for me too. What did so this one different for you at all?
It kind of, in a way, it reminded me of 28 Days Later. That's the 28 Days Later was the first one I ever saw where the zombies were fast moving, instead of the slow foot dragging ones you see in Walking Dead.
Mhm.
So the fact that these guys were so fast moving and the infection took over so quickly, that yeah, it was different. It was scarier because these guys turned so quickly and became so single-mindedly, you really didn't have a chance to react. You
Yes.
It took our central protagonists, as you said, it took them a little time to figure out what how to handle it once uh, um, a group of zombies, started in on them. They finally figured out they didn't. Once it got dark, they went through tunnels. The
Mhm.
zombies couldn't figure out what to do, and that was a good time for them to scoot past.
Mhm.
Um, so they couldn't attack what they couldn't see.
Mhm.
So that was, but that took time for them to figure that out.
Right, right, exactly, and it we and maybe we can talk even just say a little something about the subtext, which is, kind of like so we didn't even mention, I think, that the father, who is one of the protagonists, or who is probably the main, character, or his little girl might be the main character,
Right,
but the father has been like he works hard, work is his life. He actually gets his daughter a Wii for her birthday, and then she just kind of points over to her desk, and there's a Wii sitting there, which he had gotten her over on the last like holiday.
right.
So he's a pretty absent parent. And so really I think the reason why he even agrees to take his daughter on this train to get to Busan is to see her mom is because he really feels incredibly guilty. He's as he should.
Right. Yeah. He's a
Yeah,
crappy dad. He's not a
he's
good dad.
he's not a good dad, and we start to see that that personality of kind of like um, putting yourself first and really not necessarily caring what happens to people who are maybe left in the dust and financially or whatever else. We get to see his behavior conflicted with his daughter's behavior. He's always wanting to sort of save himself and his daughter only, like he's concerned only with those two.
Yeah. He actually admonishes her when she does something nice for somebody. And he's like, in this situation, it's like every man for himself. You shouldn't be helping somebody else.
Yes,
And
and she
so,
was sort of wise enough to say, you know, basically like I don't even know if she said it, but the look on her face was like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna do that."
Well, one thing, it seems like a straightforward zombie movie, but in one way, that that businessman that is the sort of heavyset businessman that is super out for himself only,
Mhm.
the paranoid one, that is really kind of um, the repository for all the paranoia and fear and
Mhm.
not trusting anything. This one business guy, it reminded me, that guy reminded me of the old Rod Serling Twilight Zones, because those Twilight
Mm.
Zones were never about really scaring you about monsters. It was always man's reaction to monsters and man's inhumanity to other men,
Yeah.
in the face of danger. Because I remember lots of Twilight Zones where there would be imminent danger, and it would be an every man for himself, neighbor turning upon neighbor
Mhm.
situation, especially during the Cold War, and paranoia was at its height in these Twilight Zone episodes. And so I noticed that this guy was sort of the Twilight Zone representative guy, where he was sowing the seeds of paranoia everywhere, uh, trying to get people to not trust this guy and his daughter, saying that they had been infected probably, and he was trying to create. He was an agent of chaos, basically,
Mhm.
and it just reminded me of those old Twilight Zones where um, it was never the monsters that were really the problem in Twilight Zone. It was the
Yeah.
human
The
beings
human beings who are the problem.
turning on each other that was always the problem. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that, I think, just reminded me of that show, where this guy was really the problem. He created more problems than necessary. Like, a lot of things would have gone a lot smoother if that guy had just kept his head and cooperated and not created so much disturbance.
Right.
He was a monster of his own kind,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
businessman kind of guy.
Yeah, he was absolutely the most selfish character, and I believe he was also connected to the company that had kind of
Oh,
inadvertently created this virus, which is leading to the end of the world, really. And and so I think that certainly this is saying something about, I think, just unbridled greed and all of that kind of stuff. And that businessman, the kind of like the overweight guy who's just the symbol of a rich jerk, basically. um, he um, he never it never like penetrate it never gets through his head that like you really have to work together. You can't
right,
do it on your own.
right,
um and so I think that you're right, like the father, and the father of the young girl, is he changes in the course of this catastrophe.
right.
And I think, like, probably his daughter is part of that change. And I think also the one of my favorite characters, actually, um I think it's the guy who has the pregnant
Oh,
wife,
yeah,
and he's
yeah,
just super, like, he just, like, kicks butt, like,
yeah.
absolute, like, and he's just very, like, he's sort of like, I think, you know, Joe working man, and and so he's actually, s he's ready to sacrifice, a lot for not only his pregnant wife, but for everyone. So he is, I mean, and really like this father who has neglected his child and who has, like almost like closed the door on people who were healthy and running from zombies, um, feels like an absolute jerk because this guy is how it's sort of like, um, it's how you need to be. It's like
Yeah,
it's compassion, and when he sees that blossom and he sees, his little girl even responding to him and becoming closer to him and his wife, um, I think he's really starting to, like, get a clue, and so, he ends up being part of that, more compassionate group, um, that is really is fighting the zombies. And we should also say the reason why these characters are traveling through the cars on the bullet train is because they're trying to get to two characters who are like trapped in the train's bathroom.
right.
So that is for sure some nail biters. Like there are definitely some scenes in there that are really like you're kind of like grabbing like you're kind of like moving your body to like where
Yeah,
you're like really trying to almost like you identify with them so much that you're like, look out, the phone's gonna ring. I don't know. It was, I think this was a really fun. This was a lot of it was it was almost kind of half action movie in a way, I
yeah.
think.
I don't consider it really a horror movie. It was more of a thriller action. Yeah. It, but since there was so much blood and there was zombies in it, I guess it was a scary movie. But one thing I noticed at the end, I thought the best scene in the movie was at the very end when they got the backup train and they the main characters catch what's left of the main characters catch the train, and there's like a couple of zombie hands on the train, and then there's like this fan-shaped pile of zombies
Oh,
holding on to each other as the train's leaving, and they're working collectively to
yeah.
climb on top of each other trying to get to the train. And I thought, these guys, I'm not trying to read too much into it, but these guys are actually using each other. The group mentality is that they're collectively trying to use each other to get, the goal is to get to these other people. And I thought it was just an interesting image that it was like, it was funny that it was all these zombies getting dragged by this train leaving the train yard, and he's out there stomping, the protagonist is out there stomping on zombie hands trying to get him to dislodge, and the zombies crawling up almost making it to the train. And I just thought that was interesting. There was like zombie teamwork going on.
Yeah, I didn't even really think of that. It's interesting because it does kind of mirror the teamwork of the other side, of the the protagonists, how they've been all along. I don't
Yeah,
know, maybe maybe there's some kind of weird mirroring there that is, I didn't even make that connection. That's really interesting. That's something to think about.
yeah, I thought it was interesting at the end there that they seemed to adapt to like a team concept of and it was just a funny visual seeing all those zombies getting dragged by that train going 30 miles an hour, and they were just so ready to sacrifice their zombie lives to try and get these guys. Since we're spoiling it, one reason I like this movie is because it wasn't afraid to do away with the protagonists.
Yes.
That I thought was remarkable, in that not all the protagonists, but like the central protagonist, no one was safe in this movie. No
Yeah.
one was safe in this movie, which I thought was remarkable. I like independent films and foreign films because I don't know the actors, and so it seems more believable to me.
Mhm.
And to do away with like a central protagonist, I was like, whoa, they're not going to save him. They're going to do away with him. That's pretty radical. And I thought that was a remarkable touch that really made it even more believable to me. That out of the 30 that started the trip, that was down to like 2 at the end.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so the only survivors were the little girl and the woman who was pregnant,
And we don't
which
even know if the girl's mom was still alive
Right,
in
right.
Busan.
Yeah, yeah.
And they almost got killed until the girl started singing some childhood song
That's
or
yes,
whatever song that was. I
that
didn't.
was yeah, it was like the song that she was singing, like, when the father was watching the video, of her singing because he
Mm,
couldn't make it to her
that's right.
thing,
That's
yeah,
right.
and so she stopped singing it because she looked out in the audience and her dad wasn't there,
Right.
and the dad was kind of like, "You can't ever stop doing something, you have to go through with it," and then later she reveals that the reason why is because he wasn't there. And and at the end, that is the song that she sings to save them because there's like a
Save their lives. Yeah.
military blockade. Yeah. And they're ready to shoot them because they don't know if they're zombies. And so that
Yeah,
was,
because they're coming through a tunnel and they can't see, and the orders given kill them. And
yeah.
then they hear that her singing that song, which I had forgotten was the song. So good pointing that out. I had forgotten that was the song she was singing, and it identified them as survivors. So that was a nice little ending there. But we still don't know if her mom was alive. All we know is, and I thought that woman was going to go into labor at some point. The way she was looking, I thought, holy guacamole, this woman's going to go into labor at any second now in
Yeah.
zombie land.
Yes. Oh my god, what a nightmare that was.
I
But
know.
but yeah, I mean, it's a really cool movie. I mean, you're definitely rooting for these characters.
Yeah.
They're really like, I think the little girl was so great. I mean, she was soulful and she was deeply convincing, like she the sadness of her sort of her life and her father's neglect was all over her face.
Mhm.
Um and she did have a kind of like maturity that um her dad hadn't ever really seen until until everything was going haywire. So I think she deserves a shout out for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
And one thing that I learned actually is that New Line Cinema bought the rights to create the English language version of this film, which it's kind of weird because there's not a ton of dialogue. It's like there's not much you have to really read, subtitle wise. So, but whatever, they're going to do an English version, and the director that they've chosen is James Wan,
Oh yeah,
and yeah,
I directed Aquaman, and he directed The Conjuring, right?
yeah, he did, which is, as you know, one of my super favorite,
Yeah, we watched that
super fun
last
movies.
week.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's gonna be interesting, and whenever, like, there's gonna be a kind of an adaptation, by the Western world of something from the Eastern world, I always kind of
Yeah,
think, like, what's different? I mean, like, one thing about bullet trains in South Korea is that they're super clean, super nice, they're really the women look like stewardesses, everything is perfect.
yeah.
Um, in the US, there's not a ton of public transportation that's really gorgeous and sterile and, and everything. So I wonder, I living in Chicago, I ride the L, which it has different lines, and it sort of varies as to cleanliness,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I was kind of trying to think about how like the differences, how it would translate, and who I would kind of want to play these different characters, and what were some things from this film that might not, just different culturally, things that might not translate.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't know, and I don't know if if how far they've gotten with it. I don't think it's out. I don't know that it started filming, but that'll be
So
interesting.
so this movie, what would you I don't know, what would you rate it? What would you give it as a grade or a rating? And would you recommend it to people?
So I would recommend it, but I would say, if you really like a psychological horror fan, this isn't gonna fill that need for you. But it is like really fun and really like tense. And I think that most people would dig this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I loved it. I would give it like a 9 out of 10. I thought it hit all the right notes. It was gripping. It was thrilling. Pretty much nonstop action. I mean, the first 5 minutes set up the movie, and then it,
Immediately,
yeah,
immediately.
and then it never let up. So I love this. I recommend it to everybody. I think everybody you don't, and it's not that scary. I think that it's more of a thriller that, but you do have to have a stomach for people biting into each other like immediately. Like here's a
Yeah,
guy shaking his hand, and then all of a sudden he's ripping into the guy's throat. So it's like that fast, the transformation. So
right.
I think we're both in agreement that we both liked it a lot and that we recommend it to everybody out there. And that is the movie
Train to Busan.
Train to Busan. I blanked on the name. Thank you. That's why I have a co-host, so that when I blank on things, she backs me right up. What have you given any thought to what we should watch next week, or should we talk about
I
it
don't know.
when we sign off?
I'm kind of interested in maybe thinking about doing The Conjuring, just because it's another one that is really like, it's scary, but it's like, I don't know how to explain it, like productively scary. Like nothing is, like a jump scare that doesn't work. It's always like legit jump scares. And
Okay.
it's not like incredibly like, it's not like so much background that you have to like hunt through history to figure it out. So
All right. Well, let's talk about it as soon as we sign off then.
perfect.
Okay. This has been A Walk in the Woods at Midnight, our very own scary movie review show. And my host has been Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, for all your insight, which has always been great.
Thank you.
And I'm Jess, and we will see you again next week with a movie to be decided. It sounds like we've decided on The Conjuring, so
We'll see. We'll see.
but we'll see. Thank you for tuning in, and feel free to leave comments. Please give us a like. Please subscribe to OmniDog's Vault, and like that. Thanks again.